I'm Rachel Norris, 58 years old, and this is the story of how I became the unwanted guest at my own son's wedding. When I stood at the entrance of the Magnolia Grand Hotel in Charleston, the receptionist shook her head while scanning the guest list. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Norris, your name isn't here." I called my son, but the person who answered was his future mother-in-law. Victoria Pemberton's cold voice rang out. "Did you really think you'd be invited? A poor mother like you would only embarrass the Pemberton family." I could have screamed, could have begged, but I didn't. I quietly placed my wedding gift on the reception desk and walked away. 30 minutes later, my phone buzzed continuously, 47 missed calls, but I never answered. Before we continue, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy this story. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is where you live. And now, let me tell you the whole story of how a mother's quiet dignity became the most powerful lesson a son could ever learn. The trouble started 2 years ago when Michael met Victoria at a charity gala downtown. I'd raised my son alone for the past decade, ever since my husband Robert passed away from a sudden heart attack. Those early years were tough, juggling work, grief, and single motherhood. But Michael and I had always been close. We had our weekly dinners every Thursday, our Sunday morning coffee tradition, and he'd call me every night before bed just to say goodnight. That all changed when Victoria entered the picture. I remember the first time he brought her home. She stepped into my modest 2-bedroom house in North Charleston, her designer heels clicking against my worn hardwood floors. Her eyes swept over the family photos on the mantel, the hand-knitted throw on the couch, the ceramic vase Michael had made me in 3rd grade. "How quaint," she'd said, her lips curving into what I can only describe as a practiced smile. "Michael, you never told me your mother lived so simply." Michael had shifted uncomfortably beside her. "Mom's house has always been perfect," he'd said, but his voice lacked conviction. That was the first crack in our foundation. Over the next few months, our Thursday dinners became less frequent. "Sorry, Mom, Victoria has this networking event," or "her father wants us at the country club." I understood. Young love makes you rearrange priorities. But then came the 5th cancellation in a row, delivered via text message while I sat at our usual restaurant, waiting. "Can't make it tonight. V says we need to discuss wedding venues. Rain check?" Wedding venues? This was the first I'd heard of any engagement. My hands trembled as I typed back, "Wedding? Michael, are you engaged?" 3 dots appeared and disappeared several times before his response. "Yeah, happened last week. V wanted to tell her family first. We'll talk soon." Her family first. Those 3 words stung more than I care to admit. When had I become an afterthought in my own son's life? I paid for my untouched meal and drove home in silence, passing by the law office where I used to work, its windows dark now. In my bedroom closet, behind Robert's old suits that I still couldn't bear to donate, sat a small fireproof safe. Inside were documents from another life, a life I'd carefully tucked away when Robert got sick. Papers that bore the letterhead, Norris and Associates, Attorneys at Law. Bank statements with numbers that would make Victoria Pemberton's eyes widen. Deeds to properties across Charleston that I'd quietly acquired over my 20-year legal career. But Michael didn't know about any of that. After Robert died, I'd made a choice to live simply, to focus on being present for my grieving son, rather than maintaining the exhausting facade of wealth and status. I'd stepped back from the firm, though I retained my partnership stake. I'd moved us to this smaller house, enrolled Michael in public school, taught him the value of hard work and humility. Now, watching him slip away into Victoria's world of country clubs and networking events, I wondered if I'd made a mistake. Should I have shown him the truth about who his mother really was? Or would that have just attracted more Victorias into our life, people who saw dollar signs instead of souls? That night, I pulled out one particular document from the safe, the deed to the Magnolia Grand Hotel. I'd won it in a complex litigation case 15 years ago, back when I was known as the Steel Magnolia of Charleston's legal scene. The Pemberton family had been leasing it from me for their events business, though they dealt with my property management company and had no idea who the actual owner was. As I held that deed, a strange feeling washed over me. Call it mother's intuition, but something told me I might need to remind certain people that Rachel Norris was far more than she appeared to be. The next 3 months revealed just how thoroughly Victoria had orchestrated my exclusion from my own son's wedding. It started subtly, a forgotten invitation to the engagement party, a miscommunication about the bridal shower date. But soon, the pattern became impossible to ignore. I found out about the wedding planning meetings through Michael's cousin Janet, who called me confused one afternoon. "Rachel, are you coming to the venue tasting tomorrow? Victoria said you were too busy, but I wanted to double-check." Too busy? I'd been retired for years and Victoria knew it. "What venue tasting, Janet?" The silence on the other end told me everything. "Oh, honey," Janet whispered. "She told everyone you couldn't afford to contribute, so you'd chosen not to be involved. I'm so sorry, I should have called sooner." Couldn't afford to contribute. The irony might have been funny if it didn't hurt so much. In my safe-sat investment portfolios worth more than the entire Pemberton family fortune, built carefully over decades of smart legal work and shrewd investments. But Victoria had painted me as the poor widow, living off Social Security, too proud to accept help. Despite everything, I held on to hope that Michael would see through it. So I did what mothers do. I loved him anyway. I spent 3 weeks hand-sewing a vest for him in the family tartan, a tradition his father had started for our own wedding. Each stitch was a prayer, a hope that my son would remember who he was, where he came from. The wedding invitation never came to my mailbox. I waited, checking every day, thinking surely there had been a mistake. Finally, 2 weeks before the wedding, I swallowed my pride and called Michael. "Hey, Mom," he answered, distracted. I could hear Victoria in the background, directing someone about centerpieces. "Michael, honey, I haven't received my invitation yet. I wanted to make sure you had the right address." "Oh, that." His voice dropped, became stilted. "Victoria is handling all the invitations. I'll ask her about it." "Ask her about it?" I couldn't keep the hurt from my voice. "Michael, I'm your mother." I know, it's just... Her family has a certain way of doing things. There are expectations. You understand, right?" No, I didn't understand. But I heard Victoria's voice getting closer, and Michael's grew rushed. "I have to go. We'll sort it out, okay?" We never sorted it out. The invitation never came. But I learned from Janet that the wedding was set for Saturday, May 15th at 4 p.m. at the Magnolia Grand Hotel. My hotel, though none of them knew it. That's when I made my first phone call to James Morrison, my former law partner who still managed Norris & Associates. "James, I need you to pull the Pemberton lease agreement for the Magnolia Grand." "Rachel? It's been years. What's going on?" "Just checking on something. Can you send me the contract?" When the documents arrived, I found what I was looking for, Clause 15.3, which I'd insisted on including in all our lease agreements. Lessor reserves the right to terminate this agreement immediately upon breach of basic courtesy and respect toward the property owner or their designated representatives. I was the property owner, and I was about to become a very disrespected representative. I also called in a favor from Patricia Worthington, a retired judge who'd been my mentor when I first started practicing law. "Patricia, I might need a witness on May 15th. Are you free?" "For you, Rachel? Always. What's the occasion?" "My son's wedding. One I'm apparently not invited to." Patricia's sharp intake of breath said it all. "That boy Michael? But you raised him alone after Robert died. What's happened?" "Love," I said simply. "Or what he thinks is love." As the wedding day approached, I prepared my gift. Not just the vest I'd sewn with shaking hands and teary eyes, but something more. A letter explaining everything. Who I really was, what I really owned, and why I'd chosen to live simply. And underneath it all, the legal documents that would change everything. Sometimes the greatest gift a mother can give her child is the truth, even when it hurts. May 15th arrived with the kind of perfect Charleston spring weather that makes you believe in second chances. I woke at dawn, my stomach in knots, and spent an hour staring at my closet. What do you wear to the wedding you're not invited to? I settled on my only good dress, a navy blue sheath I'd bought for Robert's funeral. It seemed fitting, somehow. The drive to the Magnolia Grand took only 20 minutes, but I stopped twice to compose myself. My hands gripped the steering wheel as I practiced what I'd say. "I'm Rachel Norris, mother of the groom." Simple, dignified, true. The hotel looked magnificent, decorated with white roses and gold ribbons. Guests were already arriving. I recognized several of Michael's college friends, some distant relatives from Robert's side. None of them saw me sitting in my 10-year-old Honda, gathering courage. Finally, at 3:45, I walked to the entrance. The lobby buzzed with elegant people in expensive clothes. I approached the reception desk where a young woman with a tablet stood checking names. "Good afternoon," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm Rachel Norris, mother of the groom." She scrolled through her list, frowning. Scrolled again. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Norris, but I don't see your name here. There must be a mistake. I'm Michael's mother." She looked increasingly uncomfortable. "Perhaps you could call someone? I can only admit guests who are on the list." My hands trembled as I pulled out my phone and dialed Michael's number. It rang once, twice, then... "What are you doing here?" Victoria's voice, not Michael's. She must have seen me on the security monitors. "I'd like to speak to my son, please." "Your son is busy getting married to someone who actually belongs in his life now." Her voice carried across the lobby, and several guests turned to stare. "Did you really think you'd be invited? Look at yourself, Rachel. Your discount dress, your old car outside. You'd only embarrass us. The Pembertons have standards." "Victoria, please." "Mrs. Pemberton to you, and security is on their way to escort you out, so I suggest you leave with whatever dignity you have left." The phone went dead. Around me, guests whispered behind manicured hands. I heard fragments. "Is that really the mother? How embarrassing. No wonder they didn't invite her." I stood there for a moment, feeling every one of my 58 years. Then I reached into my purse and pulled out the wrapped gift I'd prepared. It was heavier than just a vest and some papers. It carried the weight of truth. "Could you please ensure this reaches my son?" I asked the receptionist, who looked like she wanted to disappear into the marble floor. "Of course, ma'am." I placed the gift on the counter with steady hands. Inside that elegantly wrapped box lay everything. The vest I'd sewn, the legal documents showing I owned this very hotel, the termination notice for the Pembertons' lease effective immediately, and a letter to Michael explaining it all. At the bottom, wrapped separately, was a second envelope marked, "Open only if you choose truth over comfort." I walked out with my head high, even as security guards approached from the side entrance. Behind me, I heard someone say, "That poor woman." No, not poor. Never poor. Just a mother who'd learned that sometimes love means letting someone fall so they can learn to stand on their own. I made it to my car before the tears came. Through the blur, I saw Michael in one of the upper windows, adjusting his tie, the expensive one Victoria had bought, not the one his father would have worn. He didn't see me, or maybe he did, and pretended not to. I'll never know. As I drove away, my phone began buzzing with texts from Janet and other relatives who'd witnessed the scene. I turned it off. In 30 minutes, they'd open my gift. In 30 minutes, everything would change. But for now, I drove home to my small, perfect house, where the pictures on the mantel showed a boy who once loved his mother more than status, more than money, more than the approval of people who measured worth in dollars rather than devotion. That boy was gone now. The question was, would the man he'd become be brave enough to find his way back? I drove home on autopilot, muscle memory navigating the familiar streets while my mind reeled. 23 years of motherhood, and it had come to this, being turned away like a beggar at my own son's wedding. As I pulled into my driveway, I noticed my hands had finally stopped shaking. In their place came something else, a cold, clear resolve. Inside my quiet house, I kicked off my heels and walked straight to the bedroom closet. Behind Robert's suits, the safe waited. I spun the combination, Michael's birthday, and pulled out the stack of documents I'd hidden away for so long. Here was the truth Victoria Pemberton would never have guessed. Rachel Norris, the poor widow she'd just humiliated, was worth approximately $32 million. It hadn't always been this way. When I'd started at the law firm fresh out of school, I was just another eager associate drowning in student loans. But I had something others didn't: an ability to see 10 moves ahead in complex litigation, to find the weakness in any argument. By 35, I'd made partner. By 40, I was managing the firm's most high-profile cases. The real money came from the settlements. Not my fees. Those were generous but not extraordinary. It was what I did with them. Every bonus, every commission, I invested. Real estate mostly, during the 2008 crash when properties were selling for pennies on the dollar. I bought carefully, strategically, focusing on commercial properties in Charleston's historic district, properties like the Magnolia Grand Hotel. I'd won the hotel in a settlement case, actually. The previous owner had tried to stiff 300 employees out of their pensions. I'd represented them pro bono, but the judge had awarded me the hotel as punitive damages when we'd uncovered the owner's fraudulent dealings. It was worth $12 million now, generating $500,000 in rental income annually from the Pemberton's event planning business. But when Robert got diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, none of that mattered anymore. The doctors gave him 6 months. We got 18. During that time, I stepped back from the firm, keeping only my name on the letterhead and my 40% partnership stake. I wanted Michael to remember his father, not board meetings and business dinners. I wanted our last years as a family to be real, grounded, full of love rather than luxury. After Robert died, I made a choice. Michael was 15, vulnerable, grieving. The last thing he needed was to become a target for fortune hunters or false friends. So I maintained the fiction. We moved to the smaller house, though I owned it outright. I drove the Honda, though 3 luxury cars sat in a private garage across town. I let people think I was just another widow getting by. Now, sitting on my bedroom floor surrounded by bank statements and property deeds, I wondered if I'd made a terrible mistake. Maybe if Michael had known the truth, he would have had the confidence to stand up to Victoria. Maybe he wouldn't have been so desperate to prove himself worthy of her family's approval. I picked up my phone, still powered off, and turned it on. Immediately, it exploded with notifications. 47 missed calls, 63 text messages. The wedding gift had been opened. Instead of checking them, I dialed James Morrison. "Rachel, thank God. Your phone's been off and all hell has broken loose at the Magnolia Grand." "Has it now?" I kept my voice level. "The Pembertons are threatening to sue. They say you forged the ownership documents. Richard Pemberton himself called me, demanding to speak to the real owner." "And what did you tell him?" "The truth, that R.E. Norris is Rachel Eleanor Norris, senior partner at Norris & Associates, and that she's owned the Magnolia Grand for 15 years. Rachel," he went white as a sheet, "started babbling about some misunderstanding." I'm sure he did. I pulled out another document, the lease agreement with my termination clause highlighted. "James, I need you to file the eviction notice immediately. They have 24 hours to vacate the premises." In the middle of the wedding reception? They should have thought of that before they treated the property owner with such spectacular disrespect. James paused. "Rachel, is this about what I think it's about?" "My son married a woman who convinced him I wasn't worthy of attending his wedding. She stood in my hotel and told me I would embarrass them with my presence. So yes, James, this is about exactly what you think it's about." "Good God, Michael did this. But you raised that boy alone after Robert died. You gave up everything for him." "Not everything," I corrected, looking at the papers spread around me. "I kept the one thing that mattered, my self-respect. And now it's time to remind certain people that there are consequences for their actions." "What do you need me to do?" "Send the eviction notice. And James, make sure it's delivered publicly, during the father-daughter dance if possible." Some might call it petty. I called it justice. The Pembertons had taught my son that power and money mattered more than love and loyalty. Time to show them what real power looked like. Back at the Magnolia Grand, while I sat in my quiet house sorting through decades of documents, the wedding reception was reaching its peak. I learned the details later from Patricia Worthington, my friend who'd attended as a regular guest, and from several others who witnessed what happened when Victoria opened my gift. The reception was in full swing in the grand ballroom. 200 guests sipped champagne and sampled canapes while a string quartet played. Victoria, radiant in her $20,000 dress, had just finished her first dance with Michael when she noticed the wrapped gift sitting prominently on the gift table. "Oh, how elegant," she announced loudly, always one for public displays. "Let's see which of our wonderful guests brought this." She made a show of opening it, calling Michael over. The guests gathered around, expecting to coo over crystal or silverware. Instead, Victoria pulled out the vest I'd sewn. "What is this?" She held it up with obvious distaste. "It looks handmade." Michael's face changed. He recognized the tartan pattern immediately, his father's family colors. "That's from my mother," he said quietly. "Your mother?" But she didn't. Victoria caught herself, aware of the audience. How thoughtful. But there was more in the box. An envelope marked "Legal documents urgent" in my handwriting. Victoria snatched it before Michael could, tearing it open with manicured nails. The color drained from her face as she read. "This is impossible. This is fraud. It has to be." "What is it?" Richard Pemberton, Victoria's father, strode over. Victoria handed him the papers with shaking hands. The first was a notarized copy of the deed to the Magnolia Grand Hotel, with my name clearly listed as owner. The second was a letter from Norris & Associates, signed by James Morrison as managing partner, confirming the immediate termination of the Pemberton family's lease due to breach of contract, specifically the clause about treating the property owner with respect and courtesy. R.E. Norris, Richard Pemberton read aloud, his voice growing weaker with each word. Rachel Eleanor Norris. Dear God. "What's going on?" Michael demanded, taking the papers. Patricia Worthington told me later that the silence in that ballroom was absolute. 200 guests watched as Charleston's most prominent event planning family discovered they'd just insulted and humiliated one of the city's most powerful property owners, who happened to be the groom's mother. "She's bluffing," Victoria said desperately. "She lives in that tiny house. She drives a 10-year-old Honda. She can't possibly own this hotel." But Richard Pemberton knew better. He'd been in Charleston business long enough to have heard of R.E. Norris, the legendary attorney who'd disappeared from public view a decade ago. "The Steel Magnolia," he whispered. "Your mother is the Steel Magnolia?" Michael stood frozen, the papers trembling in his hands. "Mom owns this hotel? Mom is worth—" He saw the attached financial statement. $32 million? This can't be real. Victoria snatched the papers back. "She's nobody. She's just a pathetic old woman who what?" Patricia Worthington stepped forward, and I blessed her for it. "Who you just publicly humiliated and banned from her own son's wedding. I was here, Victoria. We all heard you on that phone call. We all saw Rachel leave with dignity while you gloated." The murmurs started then, rippling through the crowd. Several guests pulled out their phones, Googling R.E. Norris Charleston. The results were immediate. Old newspaper articles about my biggest cases, photos from charity galas where I donated millions, records of my property holdings throughout the city. "Michael," one of his college friends called out, showing him his phone. "Your mom represented the Charleston Seven. She won the biggest discrimination case in South Carolina history. She's listed as one of the most influential lawyers of the decade." Michael sank into a chair, my handwritten letter in his hands. He read it aloud, his voice breaking. "My dearest Michael, by the time you read this, you will have chosen your path. I've enclosed proof of who I really am, not to hurt you, but to show you what you've thrown away. I chose to live simply after your father died because I wanted you to value love over money, character over status. Instead, you've chosen a woman who values neither. The vest I made carries our family's pattern, a tradition your father started. Victoria convinced you to abandon tradition, just as she convinced you to abandon me. I will always love you, my son, but I will no longer allow anyone, not even you, to treat me as less than I am. The hotel lease is terminated effective immediately. You have 24 hours to vacate. This is not cruelty. It's consequence. Love always, Mom." The room erupted. Richard Pemberton was on his phone with his lawyer. Victoria was screaming about suing for breach of contract. Guests were either recording the drama or heading for the exits. And Michael? Michael sat perfectly still, staring at the vest I'd sewn with love, finally understanding what he'd lost. The revelation of my identity triggered a cascade of truth that Victoria couldn't stop. Michael, still clutching my letter, turned to his new wife with eyes I'm told were terrifying in their clarity. "You knew," he said quietly. "You knew she was coming today. You saw her on the security monitors and you took my phone. You spoke to her yourself. She would have ruined everything." Victoria's mask of sophistication cracked. "Look at her, Michael. She shops at discount stores. She lives in that pathetic little house. What would our friends think?" "Our friends?" Michael stood slowly. "Or your friends, because my friends would have been honored to meet the woman who raised me alone after my father died." Judge Patricia Worthington, bless her soul, chose that moment to speak up. "If I may interject, I've known Rachel Norris for 25 years. She's one of the finest legal minds I've ever encountered and one of the most generous people in Charleston. The pathetic little house you mention? She chose it to give Michael a normal childhood after his father's death, the discount clothes. She donated her designer wardrobe to charity when she retired, keeping only what she needed." "You're lying!" Victoria spat, but her voice wavered. "Am I?" Patricia pulled out her phone. "Let me show you something, dear. This is from the Charleston Charity Gala 2018. That's Rachel writing a check for $2 million to build the new children's wing at the hospital. This one? That's her receiving the Humanitarian Award for her pro bono work. Oh, and this one, this is my favorite. That's Rachel with the governor, who personally thanked her for her legal advocacy for veterans' rights." The crowd pressed closer, staring at the photos. Several people gasped in recognition. "I remember her," exclaimed Mrs. Charleston, an elderly socialite. "She represented my nephew when that corporation tried to steal his invention. She didn't charge him a penny and won him $15 million in damages. She saved my father's business," another guest added. "We never knew what happened to her after her husband died." Michael was pacing now, running his hands through his hair. "You told me she couldn't afford to contribute to the wedding. You said she'd embarrass us. You made me believe—" He stopped, his face crumbling. "Oh, God, what have I done?" "You married me, that's what you did." Victoria grabbed his arm. "For better or worse, remember? Your mother is trying to manipulate you with her money. Don't you see? She hid all this from you. She's the liar here." "No," Michael said, pulling away. "She lived honestly. She just didn't live ostentatiously. There's a difference." Richard Pemberton had been frantically making calls, but now he lowered his phone, defeated. "It's real. All of it. My lawyer confirmed. R.E. Norris owns not just this hotel, but 6 other properties we've been using for events. If she terminates all our leases, we'll be ruined," Victoria finished, the reality finally sinking in. "Maybe you should have thought of that before you banned her from the wedding," someone called out from the crowd. The room was taking sides now, and it wasn't in Victoria's favor. These were Charleston society people. They understood old money, old families, old traditions. What Victoria had done, manipulating a son against his mother, banning her from the wedding, was beyond the pale. "Michael!" Victoria turned desperate, tears streaming down her face. "Baby, we can fix this. We'll apologize. We'll invite her to the honeymoon. We'll—" "Stop!" Michael's voice was ice. "Just stop. You made me choose between you and my mother. You convinced me she wasn't good enough for your world. But the truth is, Victoria, you're not good enough for hers." He pulled out his phone and started dialing. Mom, please pick up, please." But I didn't answer. I couldn't, not yet. Victoria grabbed the phone. "She's being petty. Can't you see that? Using her money to punish us?" "Petty?" Patricia Worthington laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. "Rachel Norris just gave you the most valuable wedding gift possible, a lesson in consequences. And from what I'm seeing, it's a lesson you desperately needed to learn." The band had long since stopped playing. The cake sat untouched. Guests were leaving in droves, the scandal too uncomfortable even for those who lived for drama. Then James Morrison walked in, my faithful law partner, carrying an official notice. Mr. Richard Pemberton, this is your 24-hour eviction notice. All Pemberton events currently scheduled at any Norris property are hereby canceled. You have until 4 p.m. tomorrow to remove all belongings from the premises. This is our biggest booking season, Richard protested. We have 12 weddings scheduled. Then you have 24 hours to find new venues, James replied coolly. Mrs. Norris was quite clear. Respect is not negotiable. Michael sank back into his chair, my vest still in his hands, finally understanding the weight of what he'd lost. Not money, not property, but a mother who'd loved him enough to let him fail, so he could learn what really mattered. You know, standing in my living room that day, looking at all those missed calls, I wondered, was I doing the right thing? Have you ever had to teach someone you love a lesson they didn't want to learn? I'm curious. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have revealed the truth right away, or waited like I did? Leave a comment below and let me know. And if this story is touching your heart, please consider hitting that subscribe button. I promise you what happens next will show you that sometimes the hardest choices we make as parents are also the most necessary ones. Now let me tell you what Victoria did when she realized her entire world was about to collapse. Victoria's desperation turned to rage within minutes of James Morrison's departure. She pulled out her phone, her fingers flying across the screen as she called her father's entire legal team. The remaining guests watched in horrified fascination as Charleston's newest bride went to war against her mother-in-law. "I don't care what time it is in New York!" she screamed into the phone. "Get David Thornton on the line now. Tell him the Pembertons need him immediately." But Richard Pemberton had already received his answer. He approached his daughter with the weariness of a man watching his empire crumble. "Victoria, stop. Thornton won't take the case." "What do you mean he won't take it? We pay him a fortune." "He can't go against Rachel Norris. She mentored him when he was just starting out. Half the lawyers in the Southeast owe their careers to her. No one will take this case." The room stirred as more truth emerged. Mr. Harrison, who owned the largest construction company in Charleston, cleared his throat. "I should mention, Rachel helped me avoid bankruptcy in 2010. She restructured my entire business model, saved 300 jobs. I owe her everything. She funded my daughter's cancer treatment," added Mrs. Waverly, a prominent restaurateur. "Set up a medical trust, no strings attached. We never even knew it was her until the hospital told us years later." One by one, the stories poured out. Rachel Norris had quietly helped half of Charleston's elite at some point, never asking for recognition or repayment. The woman Victoria had dismissed as nobody had been everybody's guardian angel. Michael stood in the center of it all, his world reshaping with each revelation. "She never told me any of this, not once." "Because that's not who Rachel is," Patricia said gently. "She helps because it's right, not for acclaim. The fact that you don't know that about your own mother says everything about how far you've drifted from the values she taught you." Victoria, seeing her support evaporate, turned vicious. "Fine. We don't need her hotel. We don't need any of this. Michael and I will start fresh somewhere else. Won't we, darling?" But Michael wasn't looking at her. He was staring at a text that had just come through, not to his phone, but to Patricia's, who showed it to him. "It's from your mother," Patricia said. "She wants you to know there's a second envelope in the gift box. She says you should open it now." With trembling hands, Michael retrieved the envelope marked, "Open only if you choose truth over comfort." Inside was another letter, shorter this time. "Michael, if you're reading this, perhaps there's hope. The trust fund your father and I created for you, the one you thought was empty, contains $8 million. I never touched it after he died. It was meant for you to start your life, but only when you understood what life really meant. The choice is yours. Stay with someone who made you abandon your mother for appearances, or remember who you really are. The money will be released only if you file for annulment within 24 hours. Otherwise, it goes to charity. This isn't manipulation. It's your father's voice from beyond, reminding you that Norris men don't abandon family. Love, Mom." The ballroom exploded. Victoria lunged for the letter, screaming about extortion and manipulation. Richard Pemberton was calculating the loss of not just the venues, but potentially $8 million. The remaining guests were either recording everything or calling their lawyers to check their own contracts with Norris Properties. "She can't do this!" Victoria shrieked. "That money is ours! We're married!" "For exactly," Michael checked his watch, 3 hours and 17 minutes. And you know what? That's 3 hours and 17 minutes too long. You're not seriously considering— My mother sat alone at home while we celebrated. She sewed that vest by hand, stitch by stitch, continuing a tradition my dead father started, and you threw it aside like garbage. You made me believe she was an embarrassment when she's the most accomplished person in this room. "But I love you!" "No, Victoria. You love what you thought I could give you: status, wealth, connection to old Charleston families. But you never loved me, because if you had, you would have loved the woman who raised me." Security arrived then. My security, as it turned out, since I owned the hotel. James Morrison had arranged everything perfectly. "We're here to ensure the Pemberton family vacates the premises within the specified time frame." Richard Pemberton made one last attempt. "Michael, think about what you're doing. You're destroying a business relationship, a marriage, your entire future." "No," Michael said, clutching my letter. "I'm trying to save it. If my mother will still have me in her life after what I've done." He dialed my number again. This time, I almost answered. Almost. But he needed to sit with his choices a little longer. He needed to understand that some bridges, once burned, take time and effort to rebuild. The wedding that had started with such promise ended with Victoria in tears, mascara streaming down her designer dress, while Michael stood alone in a ballroom full of strangers, finally understanding the price of choosing appearance over authenticity. Michael didn't sleep that night. I know because Patricia Worthington told me she saw his car parked outside my house at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., and again at dawn. He never knocked, just sat there in the dark, probably wrestling with the magnitude of what he'd done and what he'd lost. Meanwhile, I wasn't sleeping either. At 6 a.m., I made a decision. I called James Morrison and asked him to deliver one more document to Michael, this time to find him wherever he was. James found him still in his car outside my house, still wearing his wedding tuxedo, now wrinkled and stained with tears. "Your mother asked me to give you this," James said simply, handing over the envelope. Michael tore it open with desperate hands. Inside was the second letter, the one that would change everything. "My dearest son, if you're reading this, you're probably sitting outside my house too afraid to knock. I know you, Michael. I carried you for 9 months, held you through countless nightmares, taught you to tie your shoes and ride a bike. I know your heart, even when you've forgotten it yourself. Here's what Victoria never knew, what even you didn't know. The $8 million in your trust fund? That was just the beginning. Your father and I created a second trust, one worth $24 million. It was meant to be revealed on your 30th birthday or on your wedding day if you married someone who truly loved you for you. But here's the twist, my son. I'm not giving it to you. Instead, I'm creating the Robert and Michael Norris Foundation for single parents. Every penny will go to helping single mothers and fathers who are struggling to raise their children alone, just as I once did. The foundation will provide legal services, emergency housing, education funds, and most importantly, dignity to those who society often overlooks. You see, Michael, your father would be heartbroken to see what happened yesterday. Not because you married the wrong person, we all make mistakes, but because you forgot the fundamental lesson we tried to teach you. Wealth means nothing without character, and family means everything. But here's my offer, and it's the only one you'll get. Come work for the foundation. Start at the bottom. Learn what real struggle looks like. Meet the single mothers who work 3 jobs to keep their kids in school. Meet the fathers who sleep in their cars so their children can have a roof over their heads. Remember what really matters. If you do this, if you spend 1 year working at the foundation, really working, not just showing up, then I'll consider having dinner with you again. Not as mother and son, but as 2 adults who've learned hard truths about each other. The choice is yours. You can fight the annulment, stay with Victoria, and try to salvage the Pemberton empire. Or you can remember who you were before designer suits and country club memberships became more important than Thursday night dinners with your mother. I've included the annulment papers, already drawn up by my attorney. All you need to do is sign them and file them with the court by 4 p.m. today. Victoria will receive a generous settlement, $1 million. It's more than fair for 3 hours of marriage, and it will prevent any lengthy legal battles. But know this, Michael. Whether you sign those papers or not, I'm done being the mother who accepts disrespect. I'm done pretending that love means accepting cruelty. I'm done making myself small so others can feel big. I love you, my son. I will always love you. But I love myself too, and it's time you learned what that looks like. Your mother, Rachel P.S., the vest I made? Your father wore one just like it when we married. He was a man who understood that real wealth wasn't measured in dollars, but in the love of family. I pray you remember that before it's too late. Michael sat in his car, the letter trembling in his hands. Through Patricia, who was watching from her house across the street, I learned that he cried for an hour straight. Then he did something that surprised even me. He got out of the car and knocked on my door. I didn't answer. Not because I was cruel, but because he needed to understand that some doors, once closed, don't open just because you knock. He needed to feel the weight of being unwelcome, uninvited, turned away, just as I had been. He left a note under my door. Mom, I'm signing the papers. I'm taking the job at the foundation. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm going to earn it. I love you. Your son, if you'll still have me, Michael. By noon, the annulment papers were filed. By 2 p.m., Victoria had been served. By 4 p.m., the Pemberton family had vacated all my properties, their empire in ruins. But the real story, the one that mattered, was just beginning. Because redemption isn't found in grand gestures or desperate apologies. It's found in the quiet, daily choice to be better than you were yesterday. Michael was about to learn that lesson the hard way. And I was about to learn that sometimes the greatest act of love is letting someone earn their way back to your heart. The confrontation between Michael and Victoria happened at the Pemberton estate, and I heard about it from 3 different sources. Their housekeeper, Maria, who called me afterward, Patricia, who was invited to witness the annulment signing, and surprisingly, Richard Pemberton himself, who showed up at my door the next day. When Michael arrived to get his belongings, Victoria was waiting in the grand foyer, no longer the blushing bride, but a cornered animal ready to strike. "You're really going through with this?" She stood at the top of the marble staircase, still in her wedding dress from the day before, mascara stained and wrinkled. "You're destroying us for her? For a mother who lied to you your entire life?" "She never lied," Michael said quietly, gathering his few possessions. "She just chose to live simply." "There's a difference between privacy and deception, Victoria. You taught me that, just not the way you intended." "I made you better. I introduced you to the right people, got you into the right circles. You were nobody before me." "You're right," Michael admitted, and even Victoria looked surprised. "I was nobody. I was so desperate to be somebody in your world that I forgot I already was somebody in hers. I was her son. That should have been enough." "This is about the money, isn't it?" Victoria descended the stairs, her voice turning calculating. "The $24 million she's withholding? We can fight this, Michael. Community property laws, undue influence, my father's lawyers. Your father's lawyers won't touch this case, and you know it. But more importantly, I don't want the money." "You don't want $24 million? Victoria laughed, but it was hollow. "Who are you trying to fool?" "The same person I've been fooling for 2 years. Myself." Michael pulled out the annulment papers. "Sign these, Victoria. Take the $1 million settlement and move on." "$1 million?" she shrieked. "For giving up my wedding day, my reputation, my future? Your mother ruined me." "No," Michael said firmly. "You ruined yourself the moment you decided my mother wasn't good enough to attend her own son's wedding. Every choice after that was just the consequence catching up." Richard Pemberton entered then, looking older than his 60 years. "Sign the papers, Victoria." "Daddy?" "We're finished in Charleston. No venue will work with us. Our clients are canceling contracts. The Norris name carries more weight than ours ever did. Sign the papers, take the money, and maybe we can start over somewhere else." "This is insane! We're the Pembertons! We don't bow to anyone!" "We do now," Richard said heavily. "I've spent the morning learning exactly who Rachel Norris is. Do you know she could have destroyed us years ago? We've been operating on her properties, succeeding because she allowed it. She could have charged us triple the rent, could have evicted us at any time. She gave us favorable terms because—" he paused, swallowing hard, "because she wanted to support local businesses. We've been surviving on the charity of a woman you called nobody." Victoria grabbed the papers, signing them with vicious strokes. "You'll regret this, Michael. When you're cleaning toilets at your mother's charity, remember, you could have had everything." "I'll have everything that matters," Michael replied, "something you never understood." As he turned to leave, Victoria played her last card. "I'm pregnant." Michael stopped. The room held its breath. Then Patricia Worthington, who'd been silent until now, spoke up. "No, you're not. I saw you drinking champagne yesterday, taking shots at your bachelorette party last week. You're many things, Victoria, but you're not pregnant." Victoria's face crumbled. Even her last manipulation had failed. Michael left without another word. But Richard Pemberton lingered, and this is the part he told me himself when he came to my door. "Mrs. Norris," he'd said, standing on my porch like a chastened schoolboy, "I owe you an apology, not just for yesterday, but for years of assumptions. I thought you were beneath us. I encouraged Victoria's attitude. I see now that we were the ones beneath you, not in wealth, but in character." "What do you want, Richard?" I asked, not unkindly, but not warmly either. "To tell you something about your son. When he left our house, he didn't take anything Victoria had given him. Not the Rolex, not the Mercedes, not even the wedding ring. He left it all behind. He said, 'These things were never really mine. They were the price of admission to a world I don't want to belong to anymore. And I wanted you to know that you raised a good man. It took him a while to remember it, but when it mattered, he chose right. That's more than I can say for my own daughter.'" Richard Pemberton left Charleston the next week. Victoria went to Europe to recover. The Pemberton empire dissolved within a month. But Michael? Michael showed up at the foundation office at 6 a.m. the next Monday, ready to work. He had a long road ahead, but for the first time in 2 years, he was walking in the right direction. Can you believe Victoria tried to fake a pregnancy? I'm Rachel again, and I have to ask, do you think Michael deserved a second chance? He was manipulated, yes, but he also made the choice to exclude me from his wedding. Some of you might say I was too harsh. Others might say I wasn't harsh enough. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What would you have done if your child chose their spouse over you? And more importantly, do you think love means forgiving everything, or does it sometimes mean teaching hard lessons? If you're still with me, please hit that subscribe button, because what happened next, 1 year later, will show you whether broken trust can truly be rebuilt. 1 year. That's how long I made Michael wait before I agreed to see him face to face. Not because I was punishing him, but because we both needed time to become different people. Him to remember who he was, and me to learn who I could be when I wasn't defining myself solely as a mother. During that year, I received weekly letters from Michael, not texts, not emails. Handwritten letters, delivered to my door every Monday. He told me about his work at the foundation, about the families he met, about the harsh realities he was finally seeing. "Dear Mom," one letter read, "Today I met a woman named Sandra. She works 3 jobs to keep her kids in school. She reminded me of you after Dad died, except you hid your struggles so well I never knew. I'm sorry I never knew." Another said, "I helped a father today file for emergency custody. He's been sleeping in his car for 3 months to save money for a lawyer. When I told him the foundation would help for free, he cried. I cried too. I understand now why you chose to help people quietly. The look in their eyes when they realize someone cares, it changes you." I read every letter, but I never responded. Not yet. He needed to do this work without the reward of my forgiveness, needed to understand that redemption isn't a transaction. Meanwhile, I was rebuilding too. I reopened my law practice, but this time focusing solely on family law and pro bono work. I sold the Magnolia Grand and 3 other properties, using the proceeds to expand the foundation. I started therapy, something I should have done years ago, to understand why I'd enabled Michael's drift away from our values by hiding who I really was. You were protecting him, my therapist said, but also protecting yourself from being seen as anything other than his mother. It's time to be Rachel first, mother second. She was right. For so long, I'd made my identity about being Michael's mother, Robert's widow. I'd forgotten I was also Rachel Norris, attorney, advocate, person in my own right. Finally, after exactly 365 days, I agreed to meet Michael. Not at home, not at a restaurant, but at the foundation, where he'd been working tirelessly. Patricia came with me for support. I hardly recognized him. Gone was the designer suit, the perfectly styled hair, the desperate need to impress. He wore simple khakis and a polo shirt with the foundation logo. His hands, once manicured, now showed the calluses of real work. But it was his eyes that had changed the most. They held humility now, and understanding. "Mom," he said simply. No dramatic apology, no grand gestures, just, "Mom." "Michael," I replied, keeping my distance. We sat across from each other in the Foundation's conference room, the same room where he'd helped dozens of families over the past year. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he began. "I'm not sure I deserve it, but I want you to know that I understand now. I understand what I threw away, what I let Victoria convince me to throw away, and I understand why you're keeping your distance." "Do you?" I asked. "Really? You're protecting yourself, setting boundaries, something you never did before, and something I took advantage of without even realizing it." I nodded, surprised by his insight. "Go on." "I've been thinking about what you said in your letter, that you love me, but you love yourself more. At first it hurt. It felt like rejection. But now I understand it's the healthiest thing you've ever said to me. Because if you don't love yourself, your love for others becomes hollow, desperate, like mine was with Victoria." We talked for 2 hours, not as mother and son reuniting, but as two adults who'd learned hard truths. I told him about my year, about therapy, about learning to be Rachel first. He told me about the families he'd helped, the perspective he'd gained, the man he was trying to become. "I'm not asking to go back to how things were," he said finally. "I know that's impossible. But maybe we can build something new, something better, something where we're both whole people, not just playing roles." I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw not the boy I'd raised or the man who'd betrayed me, but someone in between, someone becoming. "Sunday coffee," I said finally. "Once a month. We'll start there." His eyes filled with tears, but he simply nodded. "Thank you." As I left, I turned back. "Michael, the vest I made for your wedding, do you still have it?" He smiled, the first real smile I'd seen from him in years. "I wear it every Sunday. It reminds me of who I'm trying to be. Boundaries aren't walls, they're doors." And that day, I opened mine just a crack, enough to let hope in. Another year passed before I could call us truly healed. Not back to what we were, but forward to something better. The monthly coffees became bi-weekly, then weekly. Not the desperate, clingy relationship we'd had before, but something balanced, respectful, real. The foundation flourished under Michael's dedication. He'd started at the bottom, filing papers and answering phones, but his genuine compassion and tireless work ethic had earned him a position as assistant director. He lived in a small apartment now, drove a used Toyota, and seemed happier than I'd ever seen him during his time with Victoria. It was at the Foundation's annual gala, an event I'd started to honor Robert's memory, where everything came full circle. The ballroom was filled with supporters, donors, and most importantly, families we'd helped. Michael was giving a speech about the Foundation's impact when he stopped mid-sentence, looking at someone who'd just entered. It was Sarah, a kindergarten teacher who volunteered at the Foundation on weekends. I'd watched their friendship develop over months, slow, careful, built on shared values rather than attraction to status. She smiled at him from across the room, and he forgot what he was saying for a moment. "Sorry," he said to the audience, laughing. "I just saw someone who reminds me why this work matters." Later that evening, as we stood together watching the families we'd helped mingle with Charleston's elite, no one caring who had money and who didn't, Michael turned to me. "Mom, I want you to meet someone properly, not as a potential daughter-in-law or whatever, just someone important to me." Sarah approached, and I saw immediately what Michael saw: kindness in her eyes, genuineness in her smile, chalk dust under her fingernails from teaching kids who couldn't afford private school. "Mrs. Norris," she said, extending her hand, "I've heard so much about you. Thank you for creating this foundation. It's helped 3 of my students' families this year alone." "Please call me Rachel," I said, and meant it. As they walked away together, Patricia appeared beside me. "You did it, Rachel. You broke the cycle." "We broke it," I corrected. "Michael and I together. It just took us getting broken first to understand what needed fixing." The truth about boundaries, about self-love, about choosing yourself, it's not that it makes you harder, it makes you clearer. I could love Michael better now because I loved myself first. He could be a better man because he'd faced who he'd become and chosen to change. Victoria Pemberton sent a letter once, 6 months after the annulment. She was in Milan, married to an Italian count twice her age. She wrote that she'd never forgiven me for ruining her life. I threw it away without responding. Some people never learn that they are the architects of their own ruin. Richard Pemberton rebuilt his business in Atlanta, smaller but steadier. He sent a donation to the foundation every Christmas with a note, "For teaching us what matters." And Michael? 3 years after that horrible wedding day, he proposed to Sarah in the foundation's garden, surrounded by the families they'd helped together. He used his grandmother's ring, my mother's ring, which I'd kept safe all these years. "Mom," he said the night before the wedding, "I need you to know something. You're not just invited to this wedding, you're essential to it. Sarah won't even set a date until you approve." "I don't need to approve," I said. "I see how she looks at you, and more importantly, how she looks at the work you do together. That's all the approval anyone needs." Their wedding was small, intimate, held in a community center rather than a grand hotel. Michael wore the vest I'd made 3 years earlier. Sarah's students were the flower girls and ring bearers. And I sat in the front row, not as an afterthought or an obligation, but as what I'd always been, a mother who loved her son enough to let him fall and catch himself and rise stronger than before. "Boundaries aren't walls," I said in my toast. "They're doors, and they only open for those who've earned the key." Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever had to set boundaries with someone you love, you know how much it hurts, but also how necessary it is. Self-love isn't selfish. It's the foundation for all healthy love. And what did you think of my decision? Would you have forgiven Michael sooner or made him wait longer? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story touched your heart or taught you something valuable, please like and subscribe. Your support helps me share these important lessons about love, dignity, and the courage to choose yourself. Until next time, remember, you're worthy of respect, especially from those who claim to love you.